Alright, folks, this is my post-fight review, a quick one to Jonathan Gonzalez versus Mark Anthony Barriga. Jonathan Gonzalez, as many of you guys may know who keep track of these lower weight categories, won the WBO light flyweight title in a minor upset according to the odds, even though I picked him to win, against Mexican Elwin Soto, after failing to capture a world title against Kosei Tanaka, falling short against the likes of Yobert Alvarez and who else? Giovanni Segura, but picking up wins against the likes of Armando Torres, Yedras, and Saul Juarez, I believe, before the fight against Soto. And, well, Gonzalez made his first defense against Barriga, and I felt that this fight could be very boring, and I felt that it was pretty dull for the most part. Barriga, in his case, he's the less experienced guy, but he has challenged for a world title before against Carlos Licona, where he lost that fight, actually in similar fashion, fighting a boxer, fighting a guy who could move. However, in this fight, and that was a close fight too, in this fight, and I had this fight 115-113 for Jonathan Gonzalez, both guys really struggled to hit each other clean. Now, the cleanest shots for the most part in the fight came from Gonzalez. I felt both guys were relatively defensively responsible in regards to their foot movement. But in totality, I'd say the reason why Gonzalez won was not necessarily because of his boxing ability from the outside. I actually felt Mark Anthony Barriga's more active feet, his angles a lot of the time, and his ability to control the space near the perimeter of the ring was winning him a good portion of the early rounds, and he was able to outwork Jonathan Gonzalez for the most part in those instances. He was able to catch Gonzalez, not necessarily cleanly, but he was able to graze him a lot of the time, catch him to the body oftentimes with flurries, or trap Gonzalez against the ropes, and he was able to use his feet to be able to throw off his timing so he couldn't get off his left hand like he could, say, against a more stationary opponent in an Elwin Soto, or a guy with a more predictable in-and-out rhythm like a Tanaka. However, Barriga's biggest problem was he didn't go to the body, and his physical conditioning is just not on Gonzalez's level. After the first 6 rounds, where it felt like Barriga might actually win the fight, because really, it was only Gonzalez winning some of those rounds off of cleaner shots, and oftentimes Barriga just cuffing with a lot of his shots. And maybe if he had committed to more of his shots in those rounds and committed to his combinations, sat down on his shots, considering Gonzalez was unable to hurt him, I felt like he could have won at several of those, early rounds even more convincingly. But in the second half of the fight, Gonzalez started backing him down, wasn't trying to box him as much, knowing he didn't have the quicker feet. So he started to use his jab. He started to press Barriga back, get him near the ropes. He wasn't able to land clean, but making that contact with him was going to convince the judges a bit more on his work. And getting to the body and being able to hurt him, I think, to the body a little bit, and being able to consistently break him down and stop and wear down his feet, which was a huge key, reduced and subdued his responsibility of cutting the ring off to a greater degree, which really, really helped him in this fight. This fight was it was almost similar to like a Tony Harrison versus like an Ishe Smith, where you have two guys who really who are counterpunchers, attempting to try to nullify each other, or succeeding actually in nullifying each other. But in terms of looking for an alternative to solution to try to capitalize on one another's flaws, whether it be catching each other with shots at long range, drawing each other in, or being able to apply educated pressure, neither guy was able to do that. Which is why I say Gonzalez won the fight on his conditioning specifically. Because even his footwork when coming forward, he was not really moving his head off the line. He was in line for some shots from Barriga, but the fact is Barriga was not in condition to be able to set his feet and throw punches really without loading up that Gonzalez couldn't have just, stepped out of the way and gotten out of range quickly enough for. And it just made for a very ugly not so aesthetically pleasing fight, where both guys looked rather unimpressive. I guess you could say Barriga looked, the more impressive of the two relative to his perceived level in advance of the fight, but Gonzalez, while he was outboxed early, Barriga has shown conditioning problems. He showed conditioning problems actually in his last two fights on his comeback since the fight against Licona. Overall, I want to say that Gonzalez did do enough to win the fight. I felt like down the stretch, I had it 4-3 Barriga after 7, but then I felt Gonzalez really took over down the stretch. I only gave out of the last 5 rounds of the fight, I only gave Barriga 1 round. I only gave him the 11th. And I felt Gonzalez largely gave away that round. I didn't necessarily feel that Barriga had gotten a second wind, more so than Gonzalez really stopped firing to the body, was starting to surrender the pocket to Barriga more and allowing him to throw his flurries a bit more effectively. And then in the 12th round, when he really needed to step things up and make things convincing for himself, he let his hands go, went to his body, started applying more intensified, not necessarily more educated, but more intensified and more grueling and proactive pressure. Barriga's lack of conditioning effectively failed him, and he could not seal the deal and convince the judges. He wouldn't have convinced the judges anyways. The judges respectively had it 115-113 and 117-111 twice for Gonzalez. I thought 117-111 twice was harsh, but there was a lot of nip and tuck rounds, and I guess the right guy won, unlike the co-main event where Axel Aragon Vega was blatantly robbed against Cordova, who gave a valiant effort and, considering his inexperience, boxed very well, but did not deserve the decision. I was disgusted, and I almost went to sleep before the fight. And honestly, the fight, I can't even say the main event really put me to sleep or came close to putting me to sleep, because, to be honest, it was almost kind of annoying. You're watching two guys who don't really understand how to deal with the opposing style. You see Gonzalez against guys who can stand stationary or pressure him, and he looks more spectacular. He can get his punches off more safely, and I think that's part of the reason I actually feel he'd have a good chance of giving Kayaguchi a lot of problems the way he fights. Because Hirota is someone who is good on the inside, fantastic on the inside. I mean, just watch how he performed against Bermudez, a bigger, stronger guy who he was able to just nullify with his skill, his parrying, his movement, his head movement, his uppercuts especially, his counter right hands. However, when he was able to use his range, Bermudez that is, Kayaguchi struggled to close the distance, and he was struggling to defend himself a lot of the time. And I think, as a result, if Gonzalez is able to manage the distance, especially early, I think he would give Hirota a lot of problems, and I think Hirota would have to sell out a bit in order to give himself an optimum opportunity to win the fight. But I think someone like a Kenshiro would be absolute hell for a Jonathan Gonzalez, because he himself is more active on his feet. And even though Masamichi Ibuki is not the boxer that, and I know Kenshiro avenged that defeat, but even though Masamichi Ibuki is not the boxer that Jonathan Gonzalez is, he hits a hell of a lot harder. So Kenshiro would not have as much respect for him. He'd be much more willing to step into the line of fire and flurry with him. And if he is to force Jonathan Gonzalez into the center of the ring to pressure him, the fight's basically over, because he's going to be unable to cut the ring off, and Kenshiro is going to be someone who's going to be throwing at a high enough volume and is going to have heavy enough hands to get Gonzalez's respect and keep him off of him, unlike what Barriga was able to do. So those are my overall thoughts on the fight. Let me know what you all think. I'm taking my ass to sleep. I probably should have done it an hour ago. But anyways, that's how the fight went. Let me know what you guys think. Were you guys impressed? Because to be honest, I wasn't too impressed. But I kind of got around what I expected. I picked a Gonzalez stoppage, actually, because I knew Barriga did have stamina problems heading into the fight. But, he wasn't able to really find any clean left hands. I thought Barriga did a good job nullifying that, but couldn't deal with the body attack. Have a good one.